So we're gonna get started for today. Hello, everyone. My name is Miraj Vikal. I'm one of the presidents of Hillsborough High School's Medical Minds. Sorry if you guys keep on hearing that dinging noise. It's just people trying to get into the call because this meet is from our classroom. But basically today we're just gonna be going over a lot of healthcare professions, and we're gonna be also talking about combined medical degree programs because as juniors are turning into seniors and as sophomores are turning into juniors and so on. It's going to be really important that we can start to help people navigate where they want to go, especially if it's within healthcare. That's what Medical Minds is mainly about. So if your child is interested in the healthcare career or in any healthcare profession, we highly encourage that you join Medical Minds to get an overall feel of the club throughout the year. Throughout the year, we hold meetings that are they go over different subspecialties of medicine and kind of just different fields that exist in healthcare. So that's kind of what the club stands for. And today we're just going to be going over a very broad overview of different professions and stuff like that in healthcare. And then we're also going to be talking about combined medical degree programs. And today with us, we have Mrs. Amy Thompson. She's the college and career counselor for Hillsborough High School. With that, we will be getting started with the presentation. Ms. Thompson, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Hey guys, my name is Amy Thompson. I am the college and career counselor here at the high school. I work primarily start working with students individually in the middle of their junior year, all the way through to the end. For freshmen and sophomores, I tend to work with you more on the group level and encourage you to work with your assigned school counselor prior to that point. Sometimes I do answer questions by email for younger students, which is totally fine. But my schedule usually prohibits me from doing kind of one-on-one meetings since we have so many in the junior and senior class. So thanks, Miraj, for asking me to come and present. Give me 2 seconds and I'm gonna just get it runs out. Sorry, it's been a minute since I did a presentation. So we should all be good in just a sec. There we go. Okay, so I think we should be good. So the first thing I wanted to kind of start out with was talking about just giving you a sense of kind of what all is out there. A lot of times when I'm talking to students, I hear kind of the famous answer, like, what do you want to be? I want to be a doctor. And that's kind of as far as we get. And, I think a lot of students don't know what else is out there. A doctor is out there and that's got a really long path to become a doctor. We're talking 8+ years to become a doctor in most cases. But there are lots of other fields that are within the health professions broadly that have varying amounts of education that are needed to get into them. Lots of things that could be stepping stones along the way to something that requires a higher degree, but could have you working along the way. Also, sometimes students kind of start to get deeper into the medical profession and realize that I kind of want to work somewhere within the medical profession, but maybe I'm actually not really interested in being a doctor and you don't really know what else there is. So to give you an idea of what else is out there, the things that are on this screen are all the kinds of things that you can do with either a 2-year degree program or a trade program. So they're more kind of lower level, but things that you could careers that you could have for life and live on. So they're, they may have an hourly wage. Some of these are higher than others. So for instance, a licensed practical nurse, an LPN, an RN, you can make good money in those fields. Physical therapist assistant and occupational therapist assistant as well. You could be talking $50,000, $60,000, which for a 2-year degree, that is, pretty good salary to be making, in that range, but there's lots of different options there that you could do. And then we move into what could I do with a 4-year degree? So let's say I go to regular old college, I get my undergrad degree, and I realize that either I no longer want to go to med school. I'm a little bit burnt out on things. I want to take some time. I want to work first and then kind of decide maybe I want to do something else for grad school. What are some different things that you could get into kind of coming out of undergrad with just a bachelor's degree that are related in some way to the health professions? So some of these things are definitely helping professions, more typical kind of hospital type roles or doctor's office type roles, like a respiratory therapist or nursing. Then there's other things like pharmaceutical sales that could utilize the knowledge that you got from your undergrad degree in regards to science and apply it in a more businessy way. And you'll see kind of lots of other options that are there. Things like healthcare hospital administration, those get you working in a hospital if you're arty, but all really creative, artistic, like medical illustration is a really nice field for you as well. There are some grad programs, including one at like Johns Hopkins in medical illustration, that could be a possible field for you to think about. And then we've got things that require advanced degrees. So that could be a master's, or it could be a doctorate. It depends upon the program. Obviously, we've got, straight up doctor and all the different subfields, underneath doctors, so dermatologist, podiatrist, all of those other types of things. But don't forget that we've also got things, we've got dentists, which a lot more students are familiar with, and I'm starting to see some more interest from our students and potentially going into dental. I don't see a lot of interest in going into optometry, but that would also be a real good option that follows the same general undergrad path as a like a pre-med doctor student does. It's kind of like just a pre-health professions type option. Then we've got sort of the helping professions, more along the lines of social workers, counselors, psychologists, things along those lines. Physical therapists. Don't forget we've got PA, physician assistant out there as an option. Also seeing more employment opportunities in things like audiology, speech language pathology. Those are medically related. More options within things like a registered dietitian, nutritionist, things like that. Those degree programs are moving along. A lot of these programs you could previously do with a bachelor's, but have now moved to either needing a master's or potentially, or a doctorate, depending on the field. So lots of things that have kind of moved on. For those that are maybe a little bit less familiar with the U.S. education system, I'm just going to take a second to kind of talk about what that looks like. So when a student's coming out of high school, they might choose to go to a community college where they could earn a 2-year degree, or they might choose to go on to a 4-year college where they earn a bachelor's degree, or they could choose something else altogether. But let's stick with those things for today. If a student starts at a 2-year school and then they transfer to a 4-year school, they're generally doing another 2 years there to earn their bachelor's degree. So you're not doing 2 + 4, you're doing 2 + 2. So then now we're at the end of our bachelor's degree. From then, the next degree program would be a master's, which could be a year or 2 years, depending upon the degree program, or a doctorate. Sometimes students come out of their bachelor's and they enroll straight in a doctorate or MD or PhD or PsyD type of program, and that length of that program really varies. Sometimes students will go for a master's first and then a doctorate. It really depends upon the field. So that's kind of the general layout. When we talk about the medical field and students going to med school, the vast majority of students go the traditional route. So that means that they go and they get their bachelor's degree, and then they go on to medical school after that. So some of them are doing 4 years in undergraduate, and then they're going right on to medical school. Others are doing 4 years, often taking a 1-year gap in which they actually prepare their medical school applications, and then they go on for their medical school studies after that. So it depends upon what the right path is for them, which often might depend on what your undergraduate experience looks like. So when we talk about kind of that traditional route and what do people study as an undergrad, I think one of the biggest misconceptions I hear is like, oh, I have to do bio because I'm going to med school. And that's definitely not the case. You can really study whatever it is that you want. You want to study something that you like and something that you are good at and something that you are going to get a strong GPA in, because that is one of the biggest things out there in terms of getting into med school is what is your undergraduate cumulative GPA. So it needs to be something you have a good GPA in. It can be a biological sciences. It can absolutely be another science. If we look at a lot of the med school websites will have an academic profile, and they'll let you know for their incoming class, 1, what undergraduate institutions did they come from, and 2, what undergraduate majors do they have. Also, if you look at undergrad websites and you go to something called the Health Professions Office or something along those lines, Health Professions Office, pre-health advising, something along those lines, they might have statistics about students from their school that are applying to medical school and what their success rate is. And some of them break it down by undergrad major. So I know Rutgers does, for instance. If you go to the Rutgers Health Professions Office, they tell you for each and every major, how many students applied to medical school, how many matriculated, so how many enrolled. They also give you an idea about how many were admitted based upon overall, how many based upon a certain minimum GPA, et cetera. So you can get an idea about the success rates coming from that particular school. But you can see there's so many different things that are related to health studies, really, at the undergraduate level that you could choose between. Now, you're not limited to things like this. If you want to go to med school, you could be an English major, you could be a philosophy major. They go to med school too. Little known facts is that there's actually saved seats in the Johns Hopkins Medical School program for studio art majors. So that's a thing. You can do things like that. What you do have to do as an undergrad, though, is to follow the required sequence of courses needed for admission to medical school. So there's certain classes that you're going to take as an undergrad, no matter what major you do, to be admitted to medical school. And then one of the things that they'll do is they'll be doing an average of those science courses. And that's also one of the big factors that's significant for admission to medical school, in addition to your cumulative GPA. So here are lots of different options that are related. Some of these things you might wind up in medical school, but the nice part about some of these things is that they also involve other paths as well. So if you decide that medical school is not for you, they provide you with another path somewhere within the health professions that you can apply. You can get a job. You could go on for further study later on if that's what you want to do. And then we get to the land of dual and advanced degree programs. So I just want to explain what they are, and I'm going to kind of keep it at that level for now because Miraj has a lot to talk about in regards to kind of his experience and all the different types of options, especially around the BSMDs and the BSDOs. So what you'll find when we get to the point that we are looking for what colleges we want to apply to for undergrad is that some schools have combined degree programs available to you that you apply. Sometimes you apply to those programs coming out of high school. So you apply in the beginning of your senior year when you're filling out your college applications. Other schools have programs where you don't apply until you're a student at that university. Usually sometime in your sophomore year, you'll apply to them. So these are some of the most popular dual and advanced degree programs that fall within the health sciences. If you decide you want to do something else entirely, there are some schools that have programs that can guarantee you admission at 18 years old into law school, or to all MBAs and other different kinds of advanced degrees as well. So occupational therapy is moving to become a doctoral program. Physical therapy is always a doctoral. So that's usually an really advanced program is 6 years. A lot of them might be 7. Pharmacy is a PharmD, and that is a 6-year program. The most popular one is undoubtedly Rutgers for their 6-year PharmD. We're starting to see more programs within public health that combine to get you an MPH, Master's in Public Health. There's also athletic training that is common coming out of high school, sometimes nutrition, dental. There are fewer combined dental programs, but some of the more popular ones, definitely the Pitt Guaranteed Admission Program. We've got 2 or 3 students that are there within that program. Also, UConn has been popular in recent years as another place for students to apply to using dental. I believe Temple has a program. Those are the ones that come to me off the top of my head. There's also physician assistant, which is another great path for somebody that really wants to go the medical hands-on working with patients route, but perhaps wants to enjoy that and be able to have more patient conversations and deal with a little bit less of the other stuff that comes with being a doctor. It's also a shorter route. I definitely encourage students to check out the PA path. That's a really good opportunity. There's a lot of job opportunities within the PA path. There is a PA program, I believe at Rutgers. Another really good one is at DeSales, University of Scranton. There's a lot of them out there. Some really great resources on this stuff. Honestly, YouTube and TikTok are 2 of my favorite resources for checking out different fields that are out there and learning about the differences between the fields. So like, what are the differences between being a PA and a DO or a PA and an MD? Who might be suited for one path versus the other? What are some things that you should think about as you're deciding which path is for you? So those are some really good options that I encourage students to check out and kind of go down that TikTok or YouTube rabbit hole, looking that kind of stuff up. So some things to consider. When we talk about pre-med, at most schools, pre-med is not a major. That's very rarely a thing. I think one of the only places I can think of is like Penn State has a pre-med major, but most places don't. So it's usually a program, not a major. So it kind of sits to the side. So since some of you are a little bit younger, what's a major? A major is the thing that you choose that you, I'll say mostly want to study in college. So when we talk about college and our undergraduate bachelor's degree, we have some courses that we have to take no matter what we major in. So those might be things like English, you might need a social science class or two, you probably need a math class or two, humanities, might be some other different types of programs like ethics that might be required no matter what you major in. It depends on the school. Those are called your general education requirements. And then you have your major, which is the thing you're really interested in that you actually want your degree to be in. So that's not what pre-med usually is. So pre-med is usually something on the side. And usually you kind of say like, yeah, I'm pre-med, which basically means I'm taking my entrance classes for medical school. And it means that I'm working with usually it's an office. Sometimes it's more of an advising structure. It depends upon the school. But usually there's some type of health professions office or pre-health advising office, or there's individual professors or staff members at the university within like an academic services office that provide that function. And what those folks do is they help you to stay on track, make sure you're taking the right classes. They help you manage the very complicated letter of recommendation process. So, the seniors, kind of know that like they've had tons of fun this year dealing with all of that. Well, if you're applying to regular old med school or grad school, guess what? You get to do it all over again when you're in college. And so you get to form new relationships and ask those people for letters. And so you need people to help you manage that. And that's the health professions office. They often run different kinds of seminars and discussion groups. They might run MCAT prep sessions. So different things depending upon the school. So I really encourage students who are thinking they want to study something medical in college to get really hooked up when they first get on campus. Wherever it is that you wind up, you want to get hooked up with that health professions office right away. You want to get on their email listserv so that you can find out about things. Otherwise, you don't know what's going on. So for instance, at Rutgers, many of our students who are interested in accelerated med programs will include the Rutgers Newark accelerate or combined degree program amongst the programs that they apply to coming out of high school. But Rutgers also has a second option for a combined degree program that you apply to during your sophomore year. You can only find out when the applications are released from that. You can only get the application if you're on the health professions office listserv. So you kind of got to get involved with that and hooked up with that stuff right away. You really need to think about the right place for you. So I think one of the hardest things is that students can get really kind of caught up on the name of the school and the size of the school and what they perceive that will do for them in terms of medical school admission. So actually just yesterday, having told Miraj, I was on a call with an independent consultant who basically does like med school admissions. So just like there are people that might work with high school students, you might pay them and they kind of help you, an educational consultant who helps you apply to colleges. There are people who do that for med school too. So I was on call with somebody who's got a lot of knowledge in that area yesterday. One of the things she was really talking about was, some of the great success rates in students coming from smaller liberal arts colleges in regards to applying to medical school because of the increased opportunities and relationships they have. So some of the things to think about at a Rutgers/Ohio State/UCLA is, yes, they have lots of research facilities, but if you go and you start talking to professors, you want to be asking them, what percentage of your students that are doing that research are undergraduates, and as opposed to graduate students, because those are two very different things. You want, if you're applying to med school, you need to get research as opportunities as an undergrad. And when you're looking at some of those smaller schools, there's more access to you to have those research opportunities. Also, I just said a couple minutes ago, you're going to need recommendations. So that means wherever you go, once you're on day one on that campus, you need to start building relationships with those professors. And that can be really challenging at schools where there are 300 students in your biology class. And so when we talk about what, recommendations do you need when you apply to med school, they need to generally come from science professors. And those are really large classes. And you may not be asking for those letters of recommendation until junior year. So you need to think about how those professors that maybe you had in your intro to biology class in your freshman year are going to get to know you. And that's by going to their office hours, which is basically kind of like extra help hours, for lack of a better way to explain it to you guys. That's something you might identify with. It is by asking questions. It is about getting to know them. Those are the things that are also going to get you in the door to be able to do research for those very same professors. Another thing that can be a factor at larger schools, especially, is that some of those, especially those earlier courses, might be taught by adjuncts. So they may not be taught by full-time faculty at that university. So you might find in like junior year, you go back to try to get that, intro to bios, letter of recommendation, and like they don't teach there that semester, and you have no access to reach them at all. And she was talking to us about some of the experiences her students have had at different schools in trying to go back and kind of fulfill these parts of the medical school application process. So those are just those kinds of things are the things that really matter if you're kind of going to wind up going that traditional route to medical school. Some other things to kind of know for those that are thinking a little bit broader in the health professions. If you're thinking about applying to nursing in college, it's really competitive. It has to be one of the harder programs to get into at schools. Definitely stronger GPA required there, especially a stronger science GPA. They tend to be looking for students who have had experiences in high school so that they know that nursing might be the path for them. Accelerated combined degree programs of other types, PT, physical therapy, things like that, they are really competitive, definitely more competitive than a typical 4-year program because you're essentially admitting a student to graduate school at that point. And then when we talk about BA or BS, like MD or DO programs, those are like the height of the competitive, right? So you're really, again, you're admitting a student to medical school. So what you're trying to look at that point, the big question that they want to know is like, how do you know at like 17, right, that like being a doctor is the only path for you, the only thing you could possibly ever want to do. So your whole application to those programs is essentially trying to prove that you know that. And that's super hard. Like, look, I'm a lot more years older than 17, and I can't even necessarily like put into words for my own job, like how I know that this is the right thing for me. And it's really hard at 21. And it's really, really hard at 17 to be able to make that case and to be able to make the case that you have the maturity to get through the program and that you're really committed, because you don't want kids holding seats that are going to wash out along the way. And that's the same basic thing that happens when we are admitting to med school, right? You want to admit students who are going to, if they're taking a seat, you want them to get through. You don't want them to wash out along the way. So those are the things they're looking for. I know we talk about test optional, blah, blah, blah. Lots of our students have applied test optional, even some of our top students. Be aware that for some of these programs, scores may be required. And if they are required, they are meaningful, like very meaningful for them. And you will find that the majority of the BA or BSMD type programs do require scores. And when they require scores, a lot of their programs post what the minimum score is for you to be considered for the program. So what do you need to do while you're in high school? We want to look at related school clubs. So things like Medical Minds, Science Olympiad, Red Cross, other STEMI type of clubs. We want to think about those kinds of things. But then we also want to look at some non-sciencey school organizations as well. A good place to look, and they could be school organizations or outside of school, whatever you want. But so look for things that are helping professions, so that some of the things you can talk about are about, yes, I know I want to help people, and look at all the other ways I've done this, and I still keep arriving back to the place that medical and being a doctor is the way I want to do it. So it gives you some different perspective to be able to bring in. Look for outside of school experiences that are related to healthcare. That's really important. Also for nursing, PT, all those other, peripheral kinds of fields, them too. They want to know that you have done shadowing, that you have tried these things out. Working in a healthcare setting is a great way to do that. Depending upon what the limitations are, and some of those have lifted finally from COVID. You want to look for meaningful experiences, look for research experiences as well. And those can be things that you're doing on your own or researching elsewhere. And I think Miraj has had some experiences like it's a grind to find some of these experiences, and they're not going to fall in your lap. And you know what? When we talk about accelerated programs and things like that, honestly, that's kind of on purpose. The reality is it's really, really hard to take the path of becoming a doctor. And that means you really, really have to work hard and grind and put yourself out there all the time. And some of that, if you want to go to and think you're going to get into something like which essentially like an MD program as a 17-year-old, you have to show that you're ready to do that like now in high school. And so that is the researching of the programs, the looking for opportunities and things like that. You also want to be looking for other types of volunteer work and community service, especially if you're looking to go into, the health professions. That's something really key to have on there. It doesn't necessarily make a difference what it is, but look for something that's meaningful to you. I was just talking to a sophomore the other day about it who was, we were kind of having a conversation, and I said, yeah, you could go hand out water for 6 hours on some Saturday at like the Arc Walk or something like that. And is that necessary? Yeah, but, to make a program like that run, yes. And if that's important to you and that organization is important to you, then do that. If not, find something that works for you and what it is that you want to do, and something that is important to you. Because one, yeah, you'll have that for your, like a resume, for lack of a better word, for applying to college, but also that kind of gives you lots of different connection points that you're going to be able to make in your different essays and potentially your interviews should you require them at the programs that you're applying to. In terms of classes, as much math as possible. That typically means that you're going to stay on the calc track for most health professions. But if you're looking at nursing, I'd really recommend thinking about stats. As much science as possible. I encourage you to take a physics class at some level at some point. I encourage you to take, AP Sciences. There are some different options there regarding CP options and honors options that are related. Keep in mind that the more competitive the school, the more competitive the program. Most people are studying all 4 years and all 5 academic subjects, or until they've maxed that out. So like if you max out AP Spanish as a junior, no one is expecting you to conjure some senior year Spanish class or anything like that. It's kind of understood that you're done after that point. And most students are taking all the courses and all of the subjects. And for more competitive schools, those schools are mostly, or all those grades are mostly in the A's at that point. But, it varies. That is not the same for every school, but the more competitive, the more they're looking for. So kind of moving on, I don't know, we're at 4:02. I'm okay if you go, Miraj, and we do questions at the end.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to be going over the combined medical programs. Ms. Thompson did a really brief overview on them, and I'm going to be dissecting them a little bit more, as in what they are, the application process, and a few tips for applying. All right, so what are they? So I'm just going to get some basic terminology out of the way. When we say BA or BS, that stands for Bachelor's of Arts or Bachelor's of Science. When we say MD, that stands for Doctor of Medicine. And then when we say DO, that stands for Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine. Combined podiatry, dental, optometry, and PA programs also exist, but I won't be touching much on these because I didn't really apply to them, but the process is very similar, if not identical. And what these programs are, they allow you to earn an undergraduate degree, usually a BS or a BA, and then you continue your education at a medical school through a reserved spot or interview. However, there are certain requirements you have to meet in terms of your extracurricular, which can be like your research, your GPA. You are usually required to have a very high GPA, and like higher than average GPA, and you also might need to meet a specific MCAT score in order to keep your spot. And for the MCAT score, it could be a low score, but you could have specific sections that you have to score like well on. Like I know one of the programs I was admitted to for a DO school, they required me to have a specific MCAT score for each section, which is why I wasn't leaning too favorably upon that, because upon looking through that, like there are some sections where I might not be as strong as in others, and that could cause me to lose my spot. So I'm just going to really quickly talk about the ones that I got into. So going into the college admissions process, I was unsure of what I wanted to do. I was stuck between dental, DO, and MD. So I applied to a bunch of these different programs, and I got into the Pitt Dental program, Adelphi BSDO with Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, NYIT BSDO program, Nova BSDO program, Seton Hall BSMD, which is what I will be attending this upcoming fall, Illinois Tech BSDO with Midwestern University, Albany College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences BSDO program with the Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine, and I also got into U Toledo BSMD. So there are a lot of different programs out there, as mentioned before. So like some of them, like the entire application process is very, very different than others, right? Like for it's one big funnel, honestly, because you have to first you have to apply normally to the undergraduate school, and then you have to complete an extra application and or essays in addition to the regular school application. Some may have posted minimums, and it really does vary because anyone can apply by the deadline. Anyone can apply after submitting the application, or only those invited can apply. For example, when I applied to Union College BSMD with affiliation with Albany Medical College, I got the supplemental app, but that was not forwarded to everybody who applied to the BSMD program through the normal application. In fact, only less than 10% of the BSMD applicants got the supplemental application forwarded to them, and then even less than that were offered an interview, and I didn't make it to the interview. Additionally, with University of Albany BSMD with Upstate Medical University, only 25 students were selected to receive the supplemental application out of the 1,000 that applied, and I was one of them. However, I didn't advance to the interview. So it's honestly like really one big funnel to actually getting to the interview position and then getting a decision, and that entire process can take the whole year. So like interviews, obviously you're usually invited to apply. However, it can vary for some programs, like with Seton Hall. My interview isn't going to happen until junior year of my undergraduate years. And then obviously the decisions come out in like May if you're accepted into the program or not. But just really quickly, the entire process is very long and lengthy because you're not actually going to know like all of the information beforehand, like at one time. It's going to be at like different positions. Like for some programs, you'll know where you stand like right off the bat. For others, you might be at a different position in comparison to other ones that you applied to. So it's really, there's a lot of variability amongst these programs. So just keep that in mind when you are applying for them. All right, so a few tips for applying. I cannot stress this enough, but research is very important. Just having some sort of publication or lab work can really show admissions officers that you are very interested in pursuing medicine. That's not to say that research is going to be like the ticket into these programs, because I know a lot of people who have research who don't get into these programs. It's more so what you do with the research, how you get involved, and like what admissions officers can like actually extrapolate from the experience to get to know you, and if you fit within the program or if you fit within like the medical school environment. Additionally, be intentional with your list and goals. These programs are very, very difficult. When I went into the application process for colleges, I knew that like being a physician was the only thing that was on my mind, and I geared myself to work towards that since like my freshman year, which is definitely what I think helped me, figure out what I wanted to do. And like by being able to like have that intention with my goals, and just having that intention with like what I'm like applying to, like I knew that these were very hard programs, but I knew that if I didn't apply to them, I would regret. So it's like you have to be very intentional, but you also have to be very realistic that these programs are very, very difficult to get into. You also want to pursue activities that will help define you. Don't just do like the normal like shadowing or anything like that. Make sure you have some sort of connection to it, right? Like I was talking about research before. You want to have some sort of like meaningful relationship with the research that you're doing. You don't want to just do it just so you can like, get your name on the paper or something like that. At the end of the day, there are thousands of different applicants who might be able to get research as well and pursue very similar activities as you. But if they're unable to speak about it and you are, that is what I think will help define you amongst other people. Additionally, have other options you could be happy with, and have most of your list ready very early in the process. If you ask Ms. Thompson, I was a huge ball of stress because I didn't have my list ready very early because I wasn't sure if I wanted to apply to a lot of these programs or if I didn't, just because it was a big toll, just like thinking about which ones I wanted to apply to, knowing how competitive these programs were. But if you're super organized and if you have your list ready very early in the process, then you should be set in terms of that aspect, in terms of being organized and knowing what to get done when you need to get it done. It's actually like the entire process is so like hectic, like for these programs, to the point like where it's like essentially reversed my sleep schedule. So like be aware that if you're applying to a lot of these programs, like you're going to have to like you're going to be like thinned out at the end of the entire thing, because it just keeps on going and going, even until like March or April. Like I was still getting decisions back a few weeks ago. And like at that point I was thinking like, how, like, what am I going to choose from? Like, am I going to get this? Like, you're going to be pushed to the very extent that it's going to be hard to stay organized if you don't start early.
And Mirage lies. He was pretty early in the process. Sometimes I have students still adding things in like November and December, and they start to run into problems because of limits on applications and the numbers that you can submit with a certain type of application and things like that. And then he was also super duper organized. That was really, really impressive. I remember him coming in and being like, here's my spreadsheet. And I was like, oh my God, someone actually listened to me. Which was really, really good because he was super intentional about his list. He was very intentional about the types of schools that he was picking. And they are not necessarily a lot of the ones that other students at our school apply to, but he knew what he was looking for and he knew what his priority was, which is why those schools were on his list. So he had lots of options that were on there, but he knew he had done his research about the schools. He did a great job with researching the right schools for him and knowing what the differences were and what the process was at each school. So because it varies so much, it can be super duper overwhelming. And it's really hard to make it through that end of the process if you're not organized. So like he knew that, which schools he needed to do something for up front. He knew which schools he wouldn't have to do anything to until he made it to that step in the process. He knew which schools required which letters of recommendation because there are differences. And sometimes you need to submit different letters to different places and you need to be able to convey that information to your counselor because sorry, we don't know all of that for all of you for every school. So it's your responsibility to be on top of all that. And he had all of that stuff really, really well laid out. So I have to give him so much credit because I really think that's a big part of why he was so successful in the process because he did so much homework. I mean, like maybe driven him a little bit nuts doing it all, but he did so much work. And so he had the outcomes that he was looking for.
And also, don't be afraid if your intentions change, right? Like when I initially started this process, I thought if I get into one of these programs, I'm going to go there like 100%. My dream program was NYIT BSDO because I had a lot of family go through that entire process. Like they went to NYIT College of Osteopathic Medicine. They said, just go there, just get your DO degree, just like get it out of the way, and then you're set. But then I realized that I didn't want to limit myself to just that. So I ended up applying to a few more competitive ones and a few more different ones out there. And then like now here I am at Seton Hall, BSMD. And like I never thought that I would actually end up getting here. But I definitely think that like, doing the research ahead of time, especially in the summer, like because summer going into senior year is so critical. I personally didn't have time because I was doing an EMT course. But I know like my dad was consistently like pushing me and like to the point like it was like, oh my God, like, let me just like get this like out of the way just so I can like satisfy him. But yeah, like starting early is very important because there are a lot of niche aspects of a lot of different programs that you're not sure. Like no one program is going to be the exact same. Like some are going to like interview you in your undergraduate years. Some are going to interview you like if you qualify now as a high schooler. So like just knowing like the overall layout of each program that you're applying to is very important. But also I do not recommend doing what I did. I applied to 30 programs. So do not apply to 30 programs. That's just because I knew like from the very beginning that this is exactly what I wanted to do. And I wanted to like at least give my like best foot out there because it's very difficult from undergrad to get into medical school. So I wanted to maximize my chances as a high schooler getting into the entire process. All right. So tying into that last statement, these are reasons why you should or should not pursue these programs. For one, there's a lot more security with the entire med school application process, which is very, very, very competitive, especially at public universities. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of like island schools. Like sometimes if people don't get into like schools in the US, they have to go to like the Caribbean to get their medical education there and like their MD degree there or DO degree there. So like the competition for med school is like very cutthroat, and there's always like a growing interest in medical school, so it becomes harder and harder every single year. Additionally, the requirements to stay in to these programs are usually, but not always, more relaxed in comparison to what normal med school applicants would need to showcase. Like, for example, at Seton Hall, I have to get a 511 MCAT score in order to like keep my interview spot. And like once I interview and stuff like that, provided it goes well, the chances of me getting into like the affiliated medical school, which is Hackensack Meridian, is very high. But the 511 MCAT, you know, that's not necessarily like an insanely high MCAT score that people usually apply to medical schools with. Like people usually apply with like 514s, 515, 516s and stuff. And even then they still only usually get into 1 or 2 out of the 30 that they apply to. So like just be aware of what the requirements are to stay in. As I mentioned before, like part of the reason why I didn't like accept one of the DO offers that I got, which was at Nova Southeastern University, was because the medical school actually requires me to have specific sectional MCAT scores. And I know actually somebody who went through that program who got kicked out, and he was miles smarter than me, but he got kicked out because he was 1 point lower than like what the requirement was for the I believe it was the critical thinking section. So just like be very careful about like what the requirements are, but also like note that, you know, in comparison to just like applying from your normal undergraduate years, you will have a 1-up through these programs because either you'll have a reserved interview or you will have a reserved spot. It's just a matter of keeping that sustained. So some of the cons of these programs. These programs are usually affiliated with no-name schools. Needless to say, the education is amazing considering that the program itself exists at the school. But a lot of times, you know, high schoolers who are going into pre-med, like pre-med for undergrad, they think that, okay, we can go to a state school, get amazing opportunities there, or we can go to a name school and get amazing opportunities there as well. But just know that, you know, if it's a name school, there's going to be a lot of people there. Part of why I chose Seton Hall is because it's people know it as a name, but people know it as a small school. And I think that, you know, I'll have more opportunities to make the most out of myself at Seton Hall in comparison to, say, another like DO program that was actually like a bigger name school and had more people in it. So just be aware of like the fact that it is no name schools. And also it's not good for people. These programs are not good for people who are not 100% sure medicine is what they want to do. This also ties into a no name school aspect because say you want to change to like being a business major or something, or you want to drop out of the program once you're admitted. Like obviously at that point, like I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that like for business majors and like people who are going into finance and stuff, name schools might matter more in comparison for pre-med students. So that is something that you want to take into consideration. And it's also like the BSMD programs, like once you get into these programs, it's not like these programs are just like a cakewalk. They are very difficult because like you have the stress of keeping an MCAT score, you have the stress of keeping a high GPA, you have the stress of keeping a good social life because college is not just about like, you know, like MCAT, GPA, or research or extracurriculars. No, it's also about having a social life, and it's also about growing. So being able to like have all of those aspects combined can get very difficult and stressful for some people. But if medicine is 100% what you want to pursue, then I highly encourage that you apply for these programs, even though the chances to get in are not like as high. But like just like to touch upon like the no name school aspect, a lot of people do end up going to like name schools to pursue pre-med, and they do end up getting into medical school. But then there are also a lot more people that don't. So just take into consideration like if you don't get into one of these programs, which I honestly did not think I would at all. But if you don't, like that's completely fine. But think about where you can go to maximize your chances of getting into med school after, if that is your end goal. And also think if this is not something that you 100% want to do, go to a school that will allow you to, you know, discover yourself and find flexibility with your schedule, just to explore what you truly do want to do.
Kind of along those lines, some of our more popular schools. So I mentioned before, Mirage kind of a different list than what a lot of our students look at if they're looking at the combined programs. A lot of our students do tend to look at the more name school combined programs. Lots of students apply to like the BU program. There's the Brown program. There's the Rice Baylor program. Case Western has a program. There's others out there. Keep in mind those programs probably, I would say, also get the highest number of applicants, which means they have the lowest accept rates. So typically the acceptance rates on those programs are anywhere between about 1% and 3%. And so that is a really small number. Drexel is a very popular one for our students. We have someone who got admitted there this year, someone who got admitted there in, I think, 2019 or so. And we have many who apply every year and do not even make it anywhere close to the interview stage. So, that's that big funnel we were talking about. I talked to Miraj a lot earlier about, like, if you don't get into these programs, like, would you want to stay at that university? Because the important thing to remember too is that whatever school you pick, if you pick one of these accelerated programs, like, you're still going there for 3-4 years as a normal undergrad. So you need to be sure that you're going to be happy at that institution. That was one of the things we even talked about, like, last week before he made his final decision, was making sure he was going to be happy at whatever undergrad institution he picked. Because you are still a regular, you want that spot, but you are still a regular college student. And you want to know that you're going to be happy at that place for a couple of years, and feel challenged in the classroom and feel challenged by your peers when you're hanging out and you're having conversations with them and things like that. All right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and actually, just like tying into what Ms. Thompson said, like, at the end of the day, like, I got into the other program that I was debating was, I think, by far a better program, but I just, like, distance, like, became an issue for me. So at that point, it was really based on, like, what I wanted to do. And, like, I think the education was going to remain the same wherever I went. And, like, what I could make out of the program was going to be the same wherever I went. But it just became something personal for me that I wanted to stay nearby. So that's why I chose Seton Hall. So that is something that, like, not a lot of people take into consideration when they're going into the BSMB, BSDO, like, application process. But that's something that, like, made it or broke it for me. So now I'm going to be talking about what DO versus MD is and the stigma associated with DO. So basically, MDs generally focus on treating specific conditions with medications, while DOs tend to focus on whole body holistic healing with or without traditional medication. So honestly, it's just a difference in philosophy. The training and education remains the same. There used to be a significant stigma attached to the DO degree in that it was somehow inferior to an MD degree, or that it was easier to get because it was newer. That stigma, I'm pretty sure it still does exist. However, if you talk to a physician, if you go to a hospital, they will say that MDs and DOs are equal in the healthcare area. In the past, DO and MD students also had separate graduate medical education accreditation systems. Today, a unified GME accreditation system is available to all medical school graduates under the ACGME. So graduate programs previously accredited by the AOA, which is the American Osteopathic Association, are now accredited by ACGME, which levels the playing field between DO and MD graduates. So that kind of helps to alleviate the stigma associated with the DO degree. And this unified GME accreditation system makes the application and participation process for DO graduates much easier than before, and it gives these graduates opportunities to participate in many of the same programs as MDs. However, I will put this out there. As it stands, DO graduates tend to have lower match statistics for residency and are represented in less medical specialties, but this is looking to change in the near future due to the competitiveness of DO programs. So at one point, like my family went, like when they all went through NYIT College of Osteopathic Medicine, they were all able to like easily go in and go out of DO school and get their degree. But now it's not that easy. Like for one of the DO programs I applied to, it was very, very competitive this year. They actually said that they had less than 6% acceptance rate for people even moving on to the interview portion. So DO is very much starting to kick up because the stigma is just like starting to fade away as like the world is clearly changing. And I think the pandemic had a huge part to like play in that. So in general though, your qualifications such as exam scores, research experience, grades, letters of recommendation, your residency personal statement, and the impression you make in the interview will have much more of an impact on your chance to match to a desired program than your degree. Historically, the bias is that DO schools are easy to get into. Statistically, average scores and MCAT scores are lower for DOs, but if you ask any physician at any hospital, they will say it has no impact on the workplace in terms of cohesiveness and cooperation. All right. So I know that there were a few questions in the chat regarding a few resources. The only resource that I used when I was like making my list was Dr. Rubins Mini Medical School. This website is like I credit like all of my success to this website because like the owner of the website is constantly he's constantly updating the website like with like different links to the programs and like very general overviews of like how they work and stuff. They have DO, podiatry, MD, dental. They have all of the combined programs in like that in that website. Like you can like search for like a list of all of these like programs and stuff like that. Like just like out of the blue. Some don't even exist anymore, yet some websites do keep them there. But like Dr. Rubin's Mini Medical School, this was honestly the only website that I used, and this helped me like a lot in terms of like making my list and like just like figuring out the entire like just like getting myself very organized and like making that spreadsheet that Mrs. Thompson was talking about. Ms. Thompson, do you want to speak about the other resources?
Yeah, I just added a couple on there. The AAMC is a good one. There is a filter when you do the search. There's a filter on the left for people for combined programs, so you can utilize that program, but it doesn't give a ton of detail. But the AAMC also has lots of different reports and things like that. So that's a really good place to kind of do deep dives to get an understanding of what people are doing to get into medical school, where they're coming from, what kinds of programs, what majors and things like that. There's lots of reports about those kinds of things. The next two are just another couple of lists. Again, kind of as Miraj mentioned, there's lots of resources out there. Some are more updated or not updated than others, and things are constantly changing. I feel like a lot of the more accelerated programs are folding. So a lot of them are really 8 years. A lot of the 7-year and 6-year programs are kind of going back to an 8-year program. So that's something to know. And the last one is just something I noticed recently. So College Essay Guy is one of my favorite resources for essay stuff, but he does have a really good, has a nice page there, for example, about how to write some BS, a good BSMD program with some different examples for you to go over. So I think, is that our last one? That's our last one.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, this is all of our contact information. I put my personal Gmail there too, just in case you guys have questions over the summer or anything like that. Like you can feel free to reach out. The first one is my HTTPS email, and then the second one's my personal one, and then the other one was Mrs. Thompson. So if anybody has any questions like that, if you want to email us, if you can't think of it now, like feel free. But right now the floor is kind of open to questions if anybody has them.
And I'm going to paste that contact information into the chat. You can definitely reach out to me for questions about BSMD programs and things like pre-med applications. In full disclosure, I'm also the AP coordinator, so it's kind of a lot over the next couple of weeks. So email is generally the best place to get me there, and I'll try to get you outside of there. I won't have any appointments for about the next 3 weeks or 3 to 4 weeks due to AP testing. So full disclosure, I'm not ignoring people. I'm just in AP world. So Miraj, someone wants you to talk about your shadow experiences.
Yeah. So it's actually funny because I honestly didn't really have that much shadowing experience in high school. Just because of COVID and everything like that, I wasn't even able to shadow my own cousins who were like consistently at the hospital. So I actually didn't have that much shadowing experience. But what I did do was that I got my EMT license. So I took an RWJ course, and that allowed me to get my EMT license and like become a practicing EMT. So the school is very good with sending out information regarding that program. Also on our Medical Minds website, we also have like a lot of sources for people who want to pursue EMT. So that's definitely something that I think helped me in terms of in place of shadowing.
It's a really good thing. Raj, you did the one with Mr. Ireland. You did the one for high school students in the summer, that one?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. I did that one.
So the thing to know about that one, that EMT program, is that the application opens sometime in like November, and it fills super duper fast. It's the only one out there that's just for high school students. And so it's really designed around like the high school, student schedule. And it's only during the summer. You have to be at least 16 by some date in June. It kind of varies a little bit by the year, but you should start looking for that program in November. But I know, like, I asked Mr. Ireland, who's also a supervisor here, about, like, what are some other resources? And he's, there are other students can do other EMT programs. You just need to find something that works with your schedule. That's like only nights or nights in a weekend and things like that. So there are programs you can do that occur during the school year. You just have to know that it's it's a time consuming thing.
Yeah, so just to quickly answer the few EMT questions. EMT stands for emergency medical technician. So basically what you do is like you travel on an ambulance and you help with like calls and stuff like that, like emergency calls. And they like train you from like a wide array of like topics, the most common being like heart attacks and stuff like that. But you're also trained in like childbirth and like administering like medications and stuff like that. The program for EMT, it's youth and EMS, I believe, for Rutgers. And there are other programs other than the RWJ one that are open, because the RWJ one is actually closed for this year. Like it's completely filled. It fills up within like the first week. So you would have to apply next year. But I believe Priya, if Priya didn't, like Priya's another president of like Medical Minds, if you guys don't know her, but she did a different like program that wasn't through RWJ. So if you guys want, you can definitely reach out to her. Because you're in the BSMD. Okay. So to answer the question regarding the MCAT, one of the BSMD programs I got into, the MCAT was optional for me, but that was actually University of Toledo BSMD, and I actually didn't want to go. Like I just didn't want to go that far, and I just didn't see like any benefit of not taking the MCAT. Like obviously, there's a huge benefit of not taking the MCAT. But for me personally, I wanted to prepare myself for like USMLE exams and stuff like that in medical school. So I did want to prepare myself for the MCAT. But not all BSMD programs have like optional MCATs. Like for some of them, you're required to get a specific score. For some of them, you're required to get specific sectional scores. And for some of them, like you don't even need to take it. But like that, like for me, what like the other one that I got into, like that was like the Toledo one, it was optional, but it was only for like an interview. So say like I didn't like clear the interview properly, then like I would have no MCAT score, and like I'd have to rush to like finish that and get that out of the way. So that way I can apply to medical schools normally. But like that wasn't something I was interested in doing, especially just being so far away from home and like that new environment and stuff like that, because the interview happened, I believe, junior year. So it's like I would only have 4 semesters to have like a really great resume, really great GPA, and then like also worry about that interview. So it's just not something that I wanted to pursue. And yes, the EMT program is linked on the Medical Minds website. It's like you can also like look through like online if they like have other things nearby, they might have that as well.
Yeah, and the site that I posted there was one that Mr. Ireland gave me when I just checked for my email, and I emailed him in January, and that summer program was long filled by that point. And so he had pointed me to this website and said that that's a good place to check. There's a filter by county, so you can see what else is available. Miraj, I'm really glad to hear you say that about MCAT, because on that call I was on yesterday, they were really talking about that alignment between MCAT scores and board scores. Mm-hmm. And, kind of to that point that I was making before, like schools don't want to admit people that are going to wash out along the way. So if an MCAT's a good indicator of that, like you can be a great student and all, and you can be great in med school, but if you can't pass the boards at the end of the day, you can't be a doctor. And so you need to get that indication up front. And so MCAT's a really good way to do that. And, it's a lot of work. They're talking about kind of like 300 average hours of prep is pretty average. Some of we were also talking about how that's one of the reasons that while people take AP courses in high school to prepare themselves and to get into colleges, it is a reason that you could think about declining that science credit in college, because a lot of the basis of the content of the MCAT is kind of the same things you would waive out of with things like AP Bio, AP Chem, AP Physics. And so if you waive out of those things, you might really need to retake them or be at a disadvantage in the MCAT process because your knowledge may not be as great. Also, there are med schools that do not recognize AP courses as meeting the entry requirements for medical school. So they might not so I'm just going to use Rutgers as a school as an example. This is not necessarily true for Rutgers or anything, but let's say you transferred bio credit into Rutgers and they took it towards your degree program, but then you applied to medical school at UConn. UConn might say you need to have the college level bio courses on your transcript to be admitted here. And each school can make up their own, they've all got their own rules. And, you don't know if you're going the traditional path, you don't know where you're going to wind up for med school. So it could be a real good reason to take those courses, again, in college, also, especially because you might need a certain number of courses. And if you're skipping the intro courses, it's forcing you to use those higher level courses towards your science GPA that's used for admission to med school. And those are higher is probably harder in many cases. Let's see. I think I just answered Ethan questions. How do I take multiple AP per year? Because you need 5 electives in a language, right? Really kind of depends on where you are individually within the sequence of courses. It depends upon the subject. It depends on where you are. It depends on where your grades are and whether or not you're able to take those honors level courses in those subjects. Definitely encourage you to check out, meet with your counselor to see what might be possible for you based on where you are, because it really depends, depending on where you started in a certain subject, where your grades are, what you can take. It'll affect what else you can fit in each year of your study. When you get to senior year, there's a lot more space in general in your schedule that's open for you to kind of be filling in with different kinds of courses, but it also depends on what else you've done ahead of time in the way of things like career electives and art electives and things along those lines, and how have you used those classes along the way, or have you taken them in the summer, etc. Ishan, I don't know what grade you are, but I think your last name starts with an A. I will tell you, for those that don't know, Miss Housel is out of the office. She had a death in the family, so she's out for a couple weeks. So people that are Miss Housels are temporarily reassigned again to Miss Povell if they are a freshman or a sophomore. So I think, Ishan, you would have met her earlier in the year. Mrs. Povell, her office is upstairs by mine. I'm also upstairs. So you could definitely reach out to her. She could talk to you about that. If you're a junior and you have Housel, then you are going to Mrs. Flag again temporarily until Mrs. Housel gets back. Would something like virtual shadowing be useful, have the same effect? I think schools, Miraj, I feel like schools were a little bit more lenient this year, and that they understand like people had to like make things work. I mean, like activity sections on college applications were totally different even than I have seen in previous years, because people have all different kinds of experiences and they're still successful in the process.
Right. Something I will say though, I mean, I personally didn't do shadowing, but something that my family members said was that, like when you're shadowing, you're just like a fly on the wall. You're just observing everything. So really make sure like you can do shadowing, but don't let that be like your primary thing. Like you want to really get your feet in the water. Like you really want to get involved in something other than just like observing a physician, which I think is super, super important. Like with EMT, I'm like working on calls, like riding ambulances, like assisting patients, stuff like that. So that'll show that you have like a very true, sincere interest in the medical field. And like, it's not just limited to like one thing. You want to try like a lot of different things, but make sure you're very passionate about them in general. So yes, virtual shadowing is an option. For me, shadowing was not something that I just like wanted to do, because I was just like, it would just be me observing and not actually doing something. And I didn't think that necessarily that would be like very beneficial to me. But I know a lot of people that do pursue like shadowing and they do end up liking it, and it'll also help them see like, is this something that I want to like potentially do, or is it like something I don't want to do, like aside from just like us talking about it at Medical Minds. Let me see
that was a good basis, but like, and good to let you like see all the different things that it's out there. It's like a tasting menu at a restaurant, let you taste all the different things, and then you can decide which meal you want to order. And get more involved with something that's in your area of interest, whether that's EMT or getting a job at an office or something like that. Ethan asked about like electives over the summer versus AP courses in the year. Electives over the summer can work. You need to take a look at what you've already taken, what you need, what you want to take. I encourage students to make your own little 4-year plan and start to think about what do you want to take by the time you get out of here, and what do you have to take, and start slotting that into your spots. And then you start to realize what you need to take in order to be able to take that other thing that you really want to take, or what grades do you need to get in order to be able to take the classes that you want to take later on. And then you can start to see where you have holes and where you can fill those in. You also have to think about what's realistic for you in each different subject level, and taking what level is the right place for you to be successful. You can have all the AP courses in the world, but if you have C's in them, it is not helping you anywhere within the college application process at all. If you have one, is it going to kill you? Probably not. If you have a lot of them, but you're like, oh, but I'm in all the advanced classes, not going to help. Because schools do see both your weighted GPA, but that unweighted GPA is sitting there, as are the individual class grades. So, what could you take over the summer? Good things over the summer could be financial lit, if you're trying to take that. What about other things could be like your career electives. There's a 5-credit Essentials of Business class. This is a popular one to take to knock that requirement out. Some people, if you're younger, you might be hoping on computer science for next year. I do know that there's a lot of requests for that class. I think a lot of people may not be getting that class. So if you're looking for something to take this summer, something like that could be an option. You might want to take that career elective. Some students will take an online art class, or like art studies or something like that, a 5-credit art studies class in order to meet that art requirement. Those could be options for you if you need to kind of get something out of the way. I mentioned in the chat before, I generally do not recommend pre-calc over the summer in order just to get to the AP Calc track. For every probably 1 or 2 that make it and are successful, we probably have 8 or 9 that get into AP Calc and really struggle to get out of it in there, even in the first marking period. So those students tend to really struggle, just doing the online math class. Is AP Bio mandatory in order to, I assume, Harshini, you're talking about kind of like for med school, is it mandatory? No. If you can make it fit, that's great. Can everybody make it fit? Or is everybody eligible to take it? No. Is that going to doom your chances into getting into college? No, not. It kind of varies though, depending on what your background has. And you could think about other ways to kind of take some of those things. We have had some students do things like self-study in sub-subjects. We had some students like self-studying AP Chem this year. You can do that. I would really caution students from self-studying and thinking it's going to be equivalent to taking a class at admission, taking a class in school in terms of like what admissions wants to see, because it's not. But sometimes students need to do that because they can't make a particular class work within their schedule. And sometimes it has to do with where you started and where you can make it to based on where you started. Sometimes it has to do with the fact that you might be in music classes or something like that, and that's taking up a lot of your schedule. So really, it depends.
Right. And I just wanted to quickly add on to that. So, I mean, some BSMD programs do have requirements for specific courses. That's something that you would have to look into it yourself. But also, do not let like the number of AP classes define you, right? Like I know somebody is very smart. He got a perfect SAT score and he took almost the same amount of AP classes as me. And there are a lot of other people who took a crap ton more AP classes and they still didn't have the same results as him. So don't let AP classes just be like your guidance. You really if taking AP classes over the summer is something you want to do just for the heck of it, I would caution you not to do that because the summer is so valuable. You have no idea how much time, like 3 months to do quite literally anything that you want is so much more important than just taking AP classes over the summer or like getting like a 1 up in like other classes and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, it's not like the classes that are going to get you into these programs. It's more so like for one, what did you learn from the class? 2, how are you using that to benefit you? And 3, what extracurriculars did you pursue from it? So if you don't like chem, I mean, I would say still take it, but like, cause it is like one of the pre-med, like it's one of the big pre-med courses. But I mean, if you like are trying to rush it over the summer and like you don't really gain anything out of it and get a bad grade and stuff like that, you could have used the opportunity for something else to pursue, like a research opportunity. And just heads up for research opportunities, you have to start those early. Like those are not going to come to you. You have to go to them. And in my opinion, I would sacrifice like a course or something like that over the summer for a research opportunity because I know that's something that I'll gain the most out of. And I know a lot of people who would agree with me because looking back on it, some people would be like, I wish I didn't do this over the summer because I wasted time and then I had to push it off into the school year when like I really needed to get my grades up and stuff like that. So don't just be focused on the number of AP courses. I'm sure Mrs. Thompson can tell you how stressed out I was about that at one point, just like worrying about like how many AP courses and stuff like that.
Was, and I'll just in terms of the 2 classes that I see pay off the least in the summer, pre-calculus and chemistry. I see them pay off the least because while the students might get a good grade in the class, they have a really hard time passing the school final. and they tend to struggle in the next course because they rush through a summer course and we're not as steady and like solid in the content as they needed to be. So like, I feel like there are a lot of students who take that chem class over the summer between freshman and sophomore year because they're trying to scramble to get into, you know, some next class, and then they don't pass the final, wind up sometimes retaking the chem class in school. And I think like, darn, there's a heck of a lot more value that they could have had with their 10 weeks of summer than having taken a class that really just got them nowhere. And the same thing for like kids taking pre-calc between sophomore and junior year, unless you're really, really strong in all your math classes until then. And by really, really strong, I mean like 95 and up in the classes that you're in. Like if you're sitting in the 80s in Alg 2 honors, I would not think about taking pre-calc over the summer. The net results will more than likely be you sitting in the C and D range in AP Calc or worse, and then dropping down to CP Calculus as a junior and running out of calculus classes to take as a senior. So it won't really help you in the way you think it will. Pre-college programs, unless it's the highly, highly selective ones like RISE and some of those other like highly selective free ones. For the other ones, I think the deal is that, I mean, you really need to think about what you're hoping to get out of it. So I would say for most of those programs, the value is not in having that line on your resume in and of itself. You have to rationalize the value as in, you know, potentially one, your experience living away from home, if that's something that you're doing in that independence piece, but perhaps letting you explore an academic area that you would not get to explore in high school. And then what does that get you? Did it get you some connections? Did it inspire an interest in you to do something different when you came back in your next school year? So you went to this program, you learned about something you didn't know anything about, and then when you came back, you started your own research project on it, or it inspired you to join some other local organization or take a different class. Well, then it's served its value, you know, and it served its purpose, and that's really the value I would say it would have. Like just having a list of them on your application in and of itself, it says that you can pay $4,000 for a summer program. So that's not really where you're looking for it. It's like in the, what did you do with it? And then like, where else can we go with it? And what meat did we get out of it that maybe we're applying to something within our essays and things like that, so that you can make connections with things you've done and what your interests are. So I'd say that's where it can serve its purpose and where it can be helpful if it's something that you can afford doing. But there are lots of other things that you could do out there that don't cost that kind of money as the really expensive ones. And they're not all really expensive.
Right. And something I would also recommend is looking at research programs over the summer. Like if you can't get research with like an independent professor, which Ethan and I will talk about like my research experience in a little bit. But like if you can't get like in contact with the professor, if a professor turns you down or something like that, because like a lot of times people pursue research as like an independent thing. Like you have to cold email professors from different universities. But pre-college programs, I mean, I attended a pre-college program. I don't necessarily think it helped my resume at all, but it actually helped me in terms of connections because I was able to talk to one of the instructors there she was a psychologist, I believe, and she was working on some research that I was like really interested in. So I actually got like a little bit of like a footing in that. So, I mean, as long as you get some benefit from the program, like evaluate what you want that benefit to be, and then make the decision to actually pursue it. But something I will highly recommend are research programs, because those are honestly, they're very immersive, first off. And second, like, it's just like, if it's selective and colleges know the name of it, then it'll look impressive. So keep that in mind when you are like looking for like pre-college programs or like summer programs or stuff like that. So then like kind of like talking about like my research experience a little bit. So the main research that I had was actually through the school's the Walksman Student Scholars Program. So it's actually a club run by students and run by the AP Bio teacher, Mr. Dang. So that was my main research. It was a bioinformatics project, and I got published in the NCBI. So if you're interested in something like that, like in bioinformatics, reach out to Mr. Dang or reach out to students who are in that program. I can also like put the contact information in the chat. But another research opportunity that I had, I think it was with Kane University. It was like a group summer scholars research program, and basically like it was more of like a shadowing thing because like we were fresh off of COVID. Like that was the summer of 2020, which was like the COVID summer. So we didn't like really get a lot of like lab work done, but we got to see a lot of like immersive research, and like a lot of the professors were open to us working with them once everything started to open up. So now like the research is like research for me was not as present as like it should be for like a lot of other people, but now the opportunities are very much starting to open up. So I highly encourage that you start early looking for these programs. I know for juniors it might be a little bit late, but I mean for freshmen and sophomores, try your hardest to get some research in your high school career. Like it's not like a worst case scenario, but like you always have the Thomson Student Scholars Program. And even through that, like you might not get published. So I was actually very lucky that I did get published in the NCBI. So if you want some sort of like research experience or something like that, that's what I did for my like main research. But I also like had a few research programs that like allowed me to really see what research was to begin with, and like how to like get like a name on a publication, which I think ultimately helped me in the Thomson Student Scholars Program because I was able to eventually get a publication.
And if you're looking at research with college professors, basically it's about emailing them and reaching out and saying you're interested in what they're doing and wondering if they would be interested in taking on a high school student. It might be late for this summer, but that doesn't mean that you could not ask for something that takes place during the school year for something that is a more local university. They might be willing to do that. I do know some students who have, done research during school year at universities. So that's something that you could seek out if it's something that you wanted to do. I think we're at the end of our questions, Miraj.
Yeah, I think so too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, and I think I shared most of our info. I can share that the presentation that we gave. I'm just going to change permissions on it, and I'll link this stuff. I'll throw all this. If you go on my website, which I kind of linked there with the summer opportunities thing, on the left side, there's a link for special interest programs, and I do have a link there for accelerated medical programs, which I'll probably kind of change over to just be like medical programs. And I'll add a link to this presentation and some of the other things there as well, and some resources Miraj has shared with me that I can add in too. So that's there. And then here I'm going to just drop in this link for anybody who's left. And that's the presentation we gave today. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming.
All right. Bye, guys. Have a great night. I'm going to duck off. I've got to go back to my AP testing stuff now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Thompson, so much.
Bye, guys. Have a good one.
Bye. Have a nice day.
Too. I think we can stop the recording now. 1.